So it's been a tumultuous week. Interesting. We've had discussions in the Tuesday group and in the Thursday group about evil minds and negative energies, and we've done a space cleansing. And when all of this was done, I sat with my guides and I thought, okay, I'm feeling nervous. I was just feeling anxious and nervous about several things. And I could get rational about it. I could justify my anxiety. I could talk about it. But I wasn't getting past this itch under my skin. And I needed to get silent. I needed to get quiet to go and see or feel or establish what was going on inside out that I wasn't quite aware of. And when I took stock, I could find a whole range of external events that may be regarded as disconcerting or unsettling. And in the midst of that, my guide started saying things like, well, you know, it's just nerves. And I remember growing up with aunties who would say things like, oh, my shattered nerves, or don't get on my nerves, or, you know, we talk about pressing the wrong buttons. We talk about being, well, crazy enough to need a nervous breakdown. And we've had these cliches in our lives all along. But we talk about butterflies in our stomachs. I mean, we all know the story about the nerves. But I've never ever considered that the people in my life or these events or the way I live would just get on my nerves. It's like, okay, it's a bit of a surprise for me. But it refocused my attention to how is my central nervous system responding to everything that's going on around us. We've had several conversations lately about turning the Wi-Fi off, for example, and giving your entire energy system a break from those frequencies. We've talked about airplane mode. We've talked about taking time out. We've talked about getting silent and how meditation helps us to get grounded, to breathe properly, to expand our energy fields. We talk about all of these things, but we don't talk about them in the context of the central nervous system. And my guide started having this conversation, which I thought was hilarious because I've never considered that spirit would just get on my nerves. But they were irritating me, and they were pushing my buttons, and they were pressing all over the place until I was going, okay, this is not funny anymore. I mean, they were laughing, but I wasn't. What is going on? And there are days where I feel incredibly stupid in the face of this incredible wisdom of the universal intelligence. Because Spirit had a good giggle about how they're getting on my nerves, and for me to pay attention, to consciously tune in to where was I feeling this? Where was this happening? How were they affecting my central nervous system? To cut a long story short, after much turbulence, is the only way I can describe this. Felt like an airplane shaking itself up. I think my chakras got a little shaken up without my permission. I felt this incredible energy flowing through me and flowing around me. And it was one of those moments where I thought, okay, this is too high a frequency. I'm going to really freak out or flip out or explode or something. It finally calmed down, and they said, did you get it? And all I could feel was the tingling along every one of my chakras from base to crown, and then returning, exactly like the Kundalini energy does from crown to base. Now, I've done this sort of work for years, working with the Kundalini energy and working with the energy. We've all done it. We've worked with the energetic spine. We've worked with all of the primary chakras. And never once have my guides taken us to Vegas.
Well, you want to go?
Because this is like the most amazing thing for me. I'm going, why didn't anybody tell me about this? All along this energetic spine, connected to every one of our involuntary systems of the body, every function, involuntary function of the body, is a central nerve called the vagus nerve. We've never been to Vegas. Now, you know when they say when you go to Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? This doesn't apply with this particular nerve. This particular nerve is a gossip of note. It takes information from anywhere, from the crown chakra all the way down to the base, everywhere. It's a total gossip. It's a total networker. It will take information from the back of your neck and deposit it in your stomach, for example. And there are so many different little processes in the body that it affects, that I was thinking, dear God, why haven't you mentioned this before? Of all of the nerves anybody could get on, getting on my vagus nerve is enough to freak me out. And in fact, if somebody were to disconnect your vagus nerve, your body would go into a really good example of death. When somebody breaks their neck, that nerve snaps. It was so amazing for me because I'm just so not like medically or scientifically oriented to discover this nerve. And just for the record, it's not spelled Vegas like the city. It's spelled Vegas as in V-A-G-U-S. I had to go and look it up. And scientists, in their wisdom, have named this nerve the One. It is the oneness nerve. Can you believe? Now, I thought this was like the most awesome find of the week. And I got thankful that Spirit had got on my nerves. If only to get me to feel, to experience for myself how an excessive energy stimulating the vagus nerve can in fact hinder and hamper the normal, average, daily functioning of my physical body and completely frazzle my chakras. And it was little things like words that I don't like, words that will irritate me, words that will pressurize me, or words that will bring up old memories that would get on my nerves. A phone call with the wrong tone. You know, somebody talks to you in the wrong tone. That can set it off. You eat the wrong food. Something in your digestive system distresses you. That can set it off. It's such a widespread nerve that it can actually just send you haywire very easily. So I sat there thinking, why didn't we discuss this right at the very beginning of meditation? It sounds like exactly the sort of thing one needs to know about maintaining one's well-being. It's exactly the kind of energetic body to physical body connection every one of us needs to be able to make to maintain our well-being. And my guides were like, well, we've done the work. When you do healing, you are always healing the energetic spine and therefore all physical connectedness. We didn't think it necessary to name the nerve. And in fact, Spirit is not in the habit of naming and classifying things. It's only because I was so anxious and so irritated and my central nervous system was responding to everything that they finally gave me a name. And I had to go look it up. So here's what we know. The vagus nerve, as it travels all the way from the top of your head down that energetic spine through your actual physical spine, connects to the groin or the base chakra and even flows into both sides of the body, connecting the two sides of your body into oneness. So when we have done meditations about balancing yin and yang, when we've done meditations about balancing the two sides of the physical body and bringing the left side and the right side into harmony, we've been working with the vagus nerve. When you work with the Kundalini energy and the 7 primary chakras from base to crown and you bring those into balance, you are healing on the vagus nerve. If you are working with only one primary chakra at a time and you are sending energy from there upward and downward along your energetic spine, you're working with the vagus nerve. If you have any distress or dis-ease anywhere in your physical body, particularly as it pertains to the respiratory system, the reproductive system, the digestive system, and your brain, and really, is there anything left after that? You're working with the vagus nerve. This is how central it is. And the fact that it passes through every level of consciousness and is especially good at delivering information from the subconscious mind into the physical body and defending the reptilian brain activity, involuntary self-protective activity, makes the vagus nerve something that needs to be mollycoddled and understood. The awareness of how it can work against you is as important as the awareness of how to keep it functioning healthily for you. Because it works for the reptilian brain, the vagus nerve has the capacity to create paralysis in our fight or flight or paralysis, shock response. It is the vagus nerve that puts us into numbness when something shocking happens and we don't feel it. It's that numbness that we were talking about recently when we were talking about, like when Paddy died, and Vino and I were talking about Teddy, because Teddy and my dad share a death anniversary on the 30th of May, and it was 1 year for Teddy, and we know how difficult it is, because a whole year later, suddenly the realization, the understanding, the knowing that this being is not there comes up, and it's like a slap in the face inside out. And we were talking about how at the time of death, there's a numbness, there's an acceptance, there's a going through the motions, there's a making things happen, like you're taking it in your stride. And it's that being numb, that being closed off really, where you're not feeling all of your feelings and you're not experiencing everything that's going on. You're registering it, but you're not really there. The vagus nerve actually provides that kind of protection. But a year later, that information is not new. There's no defense against it. It's not a threat to your physical well-being anymore. And the vagus nerve, just very by the way, doesn't actually give a shit about your emotional well-being. So it leaves you open to all of the information that is available in your emotional body, connected to a specific date and time in your life, and it comes hurtling back at you, and you are living that experience completely a year later. I mean, I was doing it 29 months later, on the 23rd of May, I was completely frazzled, completely out of sync, because it was 29 months since Paddy had died, and it felt like it had happened a moment ago. So all of this turmoil, if you will, has had me focusing in on if I am working on my spiritual pathway to get detached from my emotional attachments to people outside of me, and therefore emotional attachments inside of me, how do I then work at being emotionally detached from the workings, these involuntary workings of my physical body? Because so much of the discipline of being spiritual is about understanding self and then minding self and being aware when something is shifting within you so that you can, in fact, manage the shift or the consequences of the shift. And if the vagus nerve is doing all sorts of self-protective reptilian brain defense mechanism things, then I should be able to manage its impact by managing my energy body connectedness to it and managing my physical body at the same time. Does that sound reasonable? So physical body posture, when we talk about meditation, we say sit up straight, make sure that you can breathe deeply, that your shoulders are straight, that your spine is straight, and all of those promote a healthy vagus nerve. Would you believe? Chanting, healthy vagus nerve. Sitting in the lotus position, healthy vagus nerve. Who would have known? Breathing. When people are having some kind of distress, I say just breathe. Get grounded. Healthy vagus nerve. Who would have known? Yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, Qigong, healthy vagus nerve. Anything, any activity that we are using on the spiritual realm, on the spiritual pathway, that engages your entire spine and causes connectivity inside your physical body is good for your vagus nerve. Sleeping in the fetal position, and we had a recent video about stretching when you wake up, healthy vagus nerve. And as long as that nerve is healthy, as long as it isn't inflamed or enlarged or in any way under stress with toxic behaviors, toxic posture, toxic food, even your diet, high blood pressure, low blood pressure, diabetes, all of these things impact on the vagus nerve. For as long as it is healthy, it will send healthy signals to all of your main systems and organs. Part of the health of the vagus nerve is related to healthy chakras. But by the same token, because everything is connected and under the law of mutuality, everything must work in harmony, an unhealthy vagus nerve will lead to congestion and what they call inflammation because of the congestion in your chakras. So if, like me, you have consistent and constant pain in your shoulders and you can't quite get rid of it regardless of what you're doing, then you need to be looking at how your vagus nerve flows upward from your heart center to your throat center, because those are the two primary chakras that would then hold the connection into the shoulders. And at that point, the vagus nerve, like angel wings, flows into my left shoulder and my right shoulder, and I have to actually heal that diamond that is created between my throat, the vagus nerves, and my heart center. Can you picture that? So I had to go there for healing. Similarly, if you have a problem with your adrenal glands, lack of vitality, or fatigue, we actually have a syndrome in the modern world, which is a fatigued adrenal gland, right? Or a stressed out adrenal gland. So then you would be working with the connection between your sacral chakra and your solar plexus. And again, the vagus nerve branches out into your adrenals, it branches out into your liver and your kidneys and your gallbladder and your lungs. It goes everywhere. And it is more prolific in its delivery of information, almost instantaneous information, than any other system, including your lymph drainage. So if you want to detoxify your system, the first place to go is the vagus gland, that nerve, because that nerve is holding all of the information from all of your systems and taking it everywhere. It's the quickest form of communication I can see in the body. If you have a pain in your big toe, or like me, if you have an infection in your big toe that has been traumatic for years, it is sending that pain all the way up to your left shoulder. It's the most ridiculous thing. Now you know about reflexology. And with reflexology, we talk about the fact that the sole of your foot is actually a map of your body. And you can treat your whole body by working on your feet only. It's a very useful system, especially if you don't want to get naked for a full massage. And it's a very effective way of massaging organs on the inside of your body. Similarly, this vagus nerve carries information up and down that will in fact make reflexology possible, because it flows into your feet. It flows into everything. And when you massage your feet, or you hurt some part of your foot, the information from there goes all the way to the top of your head. And if there is any part of your body that is already vulnerable, and in my case it's always my shoulders, well then that's where the information will lodge. Are you understanding this reasoning? It's very weird, because what happens then is one point of vulnerability hones in on an existing point of vulnerability, and they share information. Now we know how that happens, where your weakest link becomes the point of entry, where your weakest link becomes the point of exploitation. And this is one of the most self-destructive, self-sabotaging things that we do on the limited plane. I think we're designed to die as a result of the vagus nerve, just as I can see we're designed energetically to be eternal. So I looked at all of this and I thought, okay, I need to take better care of my big toe. Best I take my foot out my mouth more often. Who knew I could be so funny about the vagus nerve? You see? Well, it's a good thing I don't have any nervous conditions after this whole thing. But it really, it just like took me by surprise that there's this Kundalini energy nerve.
It's a genuine nerve.
It's a genuine nerve. It's right there. And it is so aligned with the 3 cords that run through the Kundalini energy. We know about all of this, but nobody's ever said, there's a vagus nerve for you.
Is it not the same as the spinal nerve?
I don't know that you can call it the spinal nerve, because there are a whole bunch of nerves that run up and down the spine. And I think there are quite a few, right? I think this is also known as the pneumatic nerve.
To my knowledge, inside all your bones that run up your spine is one single nerve.
That runs all the way through,
yes. And
yes.
all the others come off that.
No, then that would be the one.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's your spinal cord.
Yeah.
No, this is not called a spinal cord. It's a nerve. It's an actual nerve. There must be a spinal cord in terms of the muscles that actually joins all the spinal pieces together, because we know that there are discs and things between. Why are you asking me about the anatomy? I'm a spiritual teacher. Let's get a book with the anatomy. People look it up. Come and give us the lecture here. But I don't do anatomy. Yeah. All I know is that if you stretch this nerve, you give it flow, you give it exercise, over and above opening up the chakras that are along your spine. But when you start to give it exercise, when you give it not just energy flow or blood flow or lymph flow, but when you give it energy, by you breathing into it, how do the Chinese call it? When you move the prana or the chi from one part of the body through it, you're actually activating it for positive use. By the same token, you can overactivate it for negative use, because this is the nerve that will determine whether or not you go into a depression. So when they want to treat, scientists want to treat somebody who has been severely depressed, they use electrical shock on the vagus nerve in order to reawaken it, to stimulate it and relieve depression.
So would that be in your head that they put things on your head to, where do they shock you?
I don't know. Various parts of the body, but mainly along the spine.
So, because that's where the vagus nerve begins.
Because it begins at the top of your head,
Okay.
and it flows all the way down. It connects the two halves of the body. It connects every system in the body to the brain. It controls or manages, it would be a better word to use, all of the involuntary systems of the body. But because it is so prolific, because it goes through so many systems simultaneously, it's got a bloody nerve, right? It takes information from one part of the body to the other in such a way that the strength, now we're talking about how your immune system works. If you are strong, your immune system is strong in terms of defending one part of the body, the vagus nerve will communicate that strength to any other part of the body that suddenly comes up into distress. And so people who are generally healthy will fight off a cold a whole lot faster than people who are generally sick, because the generally healthy vagus nerve has an understanding that it is well. A not so healthy vagus nerve is happy to tune in to being sick, because the information it's carrying around is a certain level of acceptance of being sick. And it knows how to communicate that information. Let me explain this another way. I have 3 aunts. The one aunt always gives you the good stuff. She'll tell you about everybody who's gotten married and they're having babies and who's traveling, and she will give you all the happy news. The other auntie always gives you all the bad news. She will tell you who died, who's getting divorced and separated, and just the criminal stuff. When you finish talking to her, you feel like you need a bath. And then you get the auntie who mediates between the two, and she gives you some of the bad stuff, and then she'll make up for it with all the good stuff. And then she'll give you a little more of the bad stuff, and then she'll give you more of the good stuff. So just when you're settling in and you think it's a happy conversation, she'll drop you low with the bad stuff, and then she'll give you the good stuff again and build you up. And then you never know when she's going to drop you in the shit again. Yeah? And then there's me. I don't give you any stuff. I just listen. I just take it all in, tell me your stories. I'm not going to tell anybody this, and then I go home. Now you want a vagus nerve that's like me, where it sort of takes it all in. It doesn't communicate it anywhere else in the physical body. It just goes home with it, and then it clears it out. It forgets it ever heard it. You want your vagus nerve to work like that. You don't want it to work like any one of my aunties. Because if it's all the good stuff, that's great up to a point. But what that means is that when something not so good comes along, any kind of threat or vulnerability, this vagus nerve that is not accustomed to that kind of threat will overreact. And that's when we go into that paralysis or or shock system, and we seem to not be there at all. We don't live the experience. It passes us by. Some people go into complete amnesia. They can't remember anything at all, or they forget everything that's happened up to that point, or the past 10 years, because it's suddenly so traumatic. And then you get that other stuff where the vagus nerve is in survival mechanism mode. As a contributing member of your immune system, it is already defensive all the time. It's warding off all of the negative stuff, and it lives in the expectation of negative stuff. And this keeps us vulnerable. Then, when you have a small infection up there, the vagus nerve is already telling the rest of the body that we have an infection over there, and the whole bloody thing gets in on the act. So those sorts of people go from sick to more sick, to even more sick, to drastically sick and almost dead. And then we have to pull them all the way back. These fluctuations in our well-being speak to attitude about health and attitude about being fully present. So when I was experimenting with this, the one thing I noticed that when I am meditation, this entire vagus nerve gets quiet. It is not communicating anything. So everything that we do in meditation, the chanting, the crystal healing, anything you're doing on the spiritual pathway, that kind of balancing, can calm and quiet the vagus nerve so that it is absorbing and it is allowing what it absorbs to be distributed, instead of other information that the physical body keeps for survival mechanism means. So there's that. And then the vagus nerve also has the capacity to absorb high vibrational energy, like when we do energy transmissions here. Those energy transmissions, the movement of prana or chi in the body, all of that, the vagus nerve has the capacity to absorb that because it is aligned with the chakras themselves. Now when there's too high a frequency, and you've remembered times here where the high vibration was so high that there'd be shifts and changes, right? Or times where I felt like I was going to explode because the energy is so high. When the energy is so high, the vagus nerve actually cannot manage it, which is why some of the practice of Kundalini work, the Tantra work, is for the physical body to learn how to hold higher and higher vibrations and to be able to breathe easily while holding those vibrations and absorbing those vibrations. The vagus nerve cannot do it alone. If you practice Tantra and you do that kind of breathing, the vagus nerve learns how to hold a higher and higher and higher vibration. So that supports enlightenment, and that supports the ascension model, and you don't have to have spiritual flu or excessive detox effects from any kind of spiritual practice. Now, do you remember, Lou, when we did the mantra chanting, and you said you were like over-vitalized? Yeah. Well, actually what happened was your vagus nerve got like suddenly awakened. Yeah, and was sprouting all over the place. The vagus nerve, just very by the way, is the nerve that takes all that fabulous feel-good orgasmic stuff from the groin straight through to the crown. See? Now, if you knew that in those youthful days of indiscretion, this would have been far more fun. This is the wonderful thing about communication. And I get so excited about it because it encourages me to be talking to myself better more often. But there's this understanding that this nerve, as being such a gossip, it's like a fake news site on occasion. You actually need to give it the right information. If it is so quick to send one vulnerability to hone in on another vulnerability so that they can be pals and they can feel good together and they can make more friends and deplete my immune system, then I want to make sure that it's talking to the right parts of me. You want to be communicating effectively through your nervous system. And because it is so central to the central nervous system, this is the nerve you would go to if you're feeling anxious or blue or nervous or depressed or any other kind of exceptionally low or exceptionally high emotion. So rage. Now we've all had, well, okay, maybe not all, but some of us, those of us who have lived long enough, have had that experience of rage shooting up your spine like a white hot rage, and then you could really explode in the world, right? Mount Vesuvius. I remember describing myself as this when I was getting into the nose ring saga, and it was one of the things they held against me. I remember this feeling of the energy pushing upward until it felt like it was going to explode over the top of my head, and I was going to be spilling red hot angry lava on everything in sight. There you go. My vagus nerve was alive and well, and all of my chakras had already taken offense at the world. Everything was coming together and focused in on one particular emotion, supported by one particular attitude and belief system. So, this vagus nerve, I tell you. It's been fun though. It's been really great fun playing with this vagus nerve and feeling if there is any time at which I can stop it or slow it down or even shut it off. And here's what I've discovered. I can slow it down, but I cannot shut it off. If I shut it off, I am approximating death itself. Because communication within the physical body, and we know this as a fact of life, that communication within the physical body, for every little involuntary action that must take place for survival, is essential. The physical body doesn't even stop those things when you're in ICU in a coma. When your brain is not actively working in the world, it is still actively working in your body to maintain those involuntary functions. So you actually cannot stop the vagus nerve at all. You can slow it down sufficiently that any distress or normal daily stress and what we call wear and tear is repaired. So for today's meditation, I want to actually work at repairing the nerve itself. And one of the reasons I want to do that is that somebody asked me recently when I was talking about the pain in my shoulder, if I had, what do they call that? Spondylosis. No. Where your nerve is exposed or open to every kind of external stimuli.
Sciatica.
No. Like an exposed nerve. There's a medical phrase for an exposed nerve or a pinched nerve, or when people say pinched nerves, I have the impression that somebody's come along and put a clothes peg on my nerve, and it's pressing down and causing pain. Pinched nerve or exposed, whatever. Here's the thing. What is the thing? Yeah, got confused. Okay, back to this. This nerve, as I see it, should actually have 3 layers. The most external layer, I always see it in my mind as being a beautiful, bright red. That it is grounding, that it's carrying the energy up and down, and that it is solid, that it is so connected to the earth that sometimes it's a reddish brown, earthy brownish red that makes me feel like I'm connected to the trees and connected to the flowers and the plants and everything that comes of the earth itself. On the inside of that, when I look at it, I feel like there is a sheath, like a column inside that's almost silvery or white in color, and it's like a container, like a long tube through which the actual pulsating, can be pinched electrical current holding thingy cable works. Am I making sense? If you've ever opened up an electrical cable and you see there's the copper wire inside, right? And it's got that plastic tube on top. Well, that's what I'm talking about. It's like a plastic tube on top and then the copper wire, or the conductor, if you will. And in our case, in our physical bodies, it's electrical currents. It's electrical impulses running up and down these nerves. So for me, the conductor of the nerve is inside of that. So when I was working on mine, that's what I could see. I could see 3 layers that needed the healing, that needed for me to make sure that they were contained, and that everywhere where it branched off and moved in different directions and connected to other nerves, there were solid connections, that there were no disconnections, and that my vagus nerve was given as much positive light energy as possible, so that that is what it will be communicating. After I tested that, I started looking at people, and I got out photographs on my computer to look at all of the people in my life, particularly my family life, where those are the people who complain the most. And I tuned in to see what does their vagus nerve look like. And I'm telling you people, we have no idea to what extent our attitudes and our beliefs show up in our physical bodies. I mean, just becoming stooped over. You know, people whose hands begin to get gnarled and cramped, and just that the way we think and how we think about ourselves and life as a whole speaks into our physical bodies and gets communicated to every part of our bodies until those bodies become the way we think. We're actually becoming the way we think in various parts of our bodies simultaneously. I'm just astounded at the results that I see from just looking at photographs, and how does that person's vagus nerve look? How does it communicate based on the personality or the character as I've always known it? So if you have no other reason for being on a spiritual path, and you have no other reason to take a good look at who you're being in the world and what sort of character you have, and whether you have this dignity we're talking about or not, then the health of your vagus nerve and therefore the rest of your physical body should be reason enough. Did I confuse everybody? Damn! Did you nod? Oh, I was going, damn, I got it wrong again. Have I confused you, Lou?
No.
Why are you never confused? I work so hard at coming here to confuse you.